Well, I'm back in my own homeland, and I'm ready to talk about movies and shit. I've been holding off on this video for a while because my original intention was to get 1917 into it, but 1917 doesn't actually get a wide release in Canada until the 10th of January. Essentially, that means it's going to have to go on my 2020 list, which will eventually happen. I don't have time to put it on my 2019 list. I'm very pissed off about that because I was really looking forward to talking about this movie, but oh well. However, I did see 20 new movies in 2019. Now that might be not a lot, but I am a broke university student, so the fact that I get to go watch movies at all is kind of great. So I want to go through these 20 movies I saw this year, from worst to best, and give my brief thoughts on them, because I have many thoughts. That's just kind of how this goes. So yeah, here are the movies I watched, and before you ask, no, I did not fucking watch Cats. I don't hate myself that much. Sitting at the bottom of this list is Stuber, a supposed comedy about an Uber driver who has to pick up a cop and drive him around town. Now, this concept should end in a good movie. This concept should have been a really funny comedy, but it's not. It's actually pretty fucking bad. I'm actually gonna be honest with you guys, I didn't actually finish this movie. I didn't go to the theaters to watch it because I don't want to spend money on it. When I saw the trailer, I was just watching on the plane back to Halifax. And yeah, I turned it off halfway through and just started doing Sudoku puzzles to see how many brain cells I'd lost. Not only is it a complete waste of a concept, but they waste my favorite actor in the movie 6 minutes into it. They have Karen Gillan in this movie and she's dead by minute 5. I am not pleased about that. So the basic concept of the movie is Dave Bautista's hot on this trail of this drug dealer who killed Karen Gillan, and he ends up in this guy's Uber. I can't remember the actor's name, I feel so bad, but his character's name is Stu, hence the name Stuber, because his boss calls him Stuber, because Stu and Uber. It's really funny. The biggest problem with this movie is the fact that the characters are not characters. They are the most stereotypical characters I've seen in a movie. Like, Dave Bautista's character is your typical guilt-ridden cop who's sad about the death of his partner and is also super distant from his family and needs to learn to spend time with his family. Fuck, I wonder where I've seen that subplot before. Stu is just your average wussy stock character. Most of the comedy surrounding him is him screaming at everything around him because, you know, screaming's funny. Every other character in this movie is a pastiche of like cliches, some of them quite problematic, I might add, and just lazy writing. As I said, this movie should have been way better than it ended up being, but it's not because it reeks of laziness. The story is half-baked. I looked up the ending, because as I said, I didn't finish the movie, but I looked up the ending to see what I got right. I only got one tiny detail wrong. Yeah, I'm not really sure what else I have to say about this movie. It's just, it's a really lazy comedy, and I very much did not like it. And it really should have been a lot better than it was, so it's down the bottom of this list. When I was putting this list together, it was originally a bit of a battle between this and Stuber, which I classified to be the worst movie I've seen this year, but in the end, Stuber went down because, as I said earlier, it had a concept that should have been good, but it wasn't. Dora and the Lost City of Gold was just gonna suck, no way around it. It was gonna be bad. Because the source material, you don't really have a lot to make a movie out of there, and it was made by Nickelodeon Studios, so I think that tells you about everything you need to know about the direction that movie was inevitably going to go. Once again, this movie reeks of laziness. When I was watching the movie, it occurred to me that I could have written the screenplay comatose after suffering blunt force trauma to the head multiple times. It's just that bland. Every single trope you can think of from a kids movie of this type is there. Oh, you have the quirky main character who needs to learn it's okay to be herself in this new situation. And guess what? That happens. You have the friend slash sibling of the quirky character, slash cousin in this case, because it's Diego, who needs to learn to accept their friend slash sibling slash cousin's quirkiness, stand up to them and learn a lesson about what it means to be who you are. Guess what? That happens. We have the character who's like supposed to be the cool kid who's kind of a dickhead to begin with, but slowly learns to accept the main character and learns that it's okay to be different. Oh, and then you have the nerd character who's basically just there for, I'm gonna say comic relief, except he wasn't funny. They have Michael Pena in this movie, and he's somehow the least funny person in the movie, and that is actually saying quite a lot. There's this section where he's trying to tell Dora about modern electronic music, I guess, and it is 30 seconds of Michael Pena badly beatboxing, and it is the most painful fucking thing in a movie ever. It just hurt my soul. The basic story of this reads like a really shitty version of Raiders of the Lost Ark down to the fucking temples and everything. There is just not a moment of originality in this movie at all, and it just, I mean, as I said, I knew that going in, but it was worse than I was expecting. But my 10-year-old brother had a good time watching it, so I guess that's all that matters in the end. Originally, again, I wasn't gonna watch this movie, but my brother texted me and he's like, hey, we're gonna go watch a bad movie, you're coming along. So I sat with my brothers and we watched it, and one of them fell asleep about halfway through. I think that should indicate to you what kind of a movie we're dealing with. Dark Phoenix, I don't know what it is about the Phoenix arc, but both times they've tried to turn it into a movie, it sucked. X-Men The Last Stand was pretty shit, we all know that by now. But this one is worse by a considerable margin. The story is lazy and boring and kinda stupid. Hans Zimmer's score is shockingly uninspiring. As I say shockingly because Hans Zimmer has done some of my favorite soundtracks of all time, and this one, it's just boring. He clearly did not give a fuck. The performances are all range from like uninspiring to just flat out terrible. You have some great names here like McAvoy, Fassbender, but they don't give a fuck, and it really shows. The only one I can say seems to be at least trying is James McAvoy, but they assassinate Professor X's character through this film so much that even he comes across as not doing so well. Michael Fassbender, he's reading the lines, that's about all he's putting into it. This is the only thing I've seen Sophie Turner in because I don't watch Game of Thrones, but I'm not convinced that she can act from this movie. Jennifer Lawrence is of course clearly there for the paycheck. On top of that, her death scene halfway through the movie just added nothing to it. It was so egregious and stupid and a really ridiculous way of trying to get us to care about the events of the movie, but we don't. The villains in this movie are just second-rate Skrulls and add very little to the plot and just suck all around. There's a really stupid fight scene towards the end of the movie where they're trying to get Jean Grey away from these aliens, but it's just the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants just fighting each other in the streets. We get the worst usage of the PG-13 F-bomb in movie history.
If you touch her, I will fucking kill you.
The reason this one is as high as I've put it here is because I actually kind of enjoyed tearing this one apart with my brothers watching it. It was really fun. Yeah, but it's a terrible movie. I would not recommend that you try and watch it unironically. Well, this was disappointing, wasn't it? For context, I really like the Lego Movie. I don't know many people who don't like the Lego Movie. It's a really fun, really silly, nice 2-hour commercial for Lego. And when they were saying that there'd be a second one, I was like, alright, I'll watch this. And I sat down in the theater and I walked out and I remember thinking, okay, that happened. I don't know what it is because, like, in some ways it's not the worst movie I've ever seen, and in most ways it's actually a pretty passable kids movie. But there was just something relatively empty compared to the first one, and I am legitimately having a hard time finding the words for it. It wasn't as impressive this time around, I don't think, and I'm not really sure why. I think part of it is their bizarre choice to make this one a fucking musical. I remember when I was sitting there in the theater and the music cue started playing up, and then we have Wildstyle being like, "Are we in a musical?" And I remember sitting there thinking, I fucking hope it's not, and then they start singing and I'm like, fuck. Because I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I'm not a musical fan. I don't mind Singing in the Rain though. Barring that, I can't tell you why this doesn't work for me and why it apparently didn't work for anyone else. It's just there. And if there's anything more disappointing than a shitty movie, it's just a movie that's just kind of there. And that's what this is. It's a real disappointment. I'm not mad that I saw it though. At least I know But yeah. The more I think about this movie, the more I realize I don't have anything to say about it. My brother and I saw it, we had fun. That's about it. It's a pretty formulaic movie for the most part, and by the most part I mean all of it. I think really the most interesting thing about it is Tessa Thompson and Chris Hemsworth. They clearly had chemistry from when they did Thor Ragnarok, and it continues to show in this movie. But aside from that, it's a shooty alien movie. So if you like those, give it a watch. Otherwise, it's a fine shooty alien movie. That's really all I have to say about it, the more I think about it. Which is a shame, because I like the Men in Black movies, but this one is just there. Now, I seem to remember my review of this movie when it first came out being kind of positive. I remember saying things like, oh, it wasn't so bad, it wasn't as bad as the critics said, I had a lot of fun with it, and I'm not going to deny that I did have fun with it when I watched it, because that would be stupid, but I've cooled pretty drastically on this movie now, and this is something that I find is happening a lot with the Marvel movies for me. I enjoy them in the theaters, and then I walk out, and the further away I get from them, the more I realize all the problems that the movie has. And the biggest problem with Captain Marvel is that it's quite uninspired. I don't mind the 90s setting, it provides most of the fun for this movie to me, but there's just so much of this movie that's just, it's not a movie I want to rewatch, I think is the best way of putting it. Because as I said, it was fun the first time, but I know I would not have the same amount of fun watching it again. And before you ask how I know because my 10-year-old brother was watching it a while ago, and I just couldn't sit down and watch it with him. It was just, I couldn't do it. I don't know whether it's down to the bland color schemes that Marvel seems to be running with these days, and I'll get back to this in a minute because it's something that really drives me up the fucking wall, or just Brie Larson's lack of charisma in this movie. And I'm not gonna jump on the whole Brie Larson can't act thing, because she can, I know she can, but it's just in this movie, I don't know what it is, but it's just not there. The personality that I've seen her have and other things, just it's not there, and that's a shame, because if it was, I'd enjoy this movie a lot more. And there are other things too, like the uninspiring effects and the fucking CGI cat. That fucking cat. If they'd spent like 30 more seconds rendering that fucking thing, I wouldn't be so angry about it, but just look at this shit. Really, the person who saves this movie from being any lower on this list is Samuel L. Jackson, because he's fun and the de-aging effects on him are pretty good. The de-aging effects on Agent Coulson, a little less so. But all in all, Captain Marvel is a completely passable superhero movie. Once again, I'm aware that I gave this a pretty positive review when I watched it. I said it was a satisfying ending to the thing, and I was just happy to have been done with it. To some extent, I still stand by that. I still think it's a decent, I say decent, ending to the franchise. Especially the last hour, that wraps things up quite nicely. The problem is, the last hour is attached to 2 hours of a meandering plot that it really doesn't hold up the more I think about it. And this could come down to just time travel mechanics, and I know I'm the first person to say don't think about it when it comes to time travel movies, but I don't know. As I said earlier, the further away I get from these Marvel movies, the more I think about them and the less I like them. I guess the biggest sticking point for me for Endgame is it is the most offensive offender of the Marvel grayscale color grading scheme in the franchise, aside from Civil War and Ant-Man and the Wasp. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a very good video by Patrick Willems on why Marvel movies look kind of ugly. This just really gets in the way of this movie for me. If I'm going to be sitting and watching a movie for 3 hours, I want to be looking at something that looks pretty, and this movie does not. Some people have said, but isn't the grayscale color grading a choice here by the movie makers to make it look dreary and sad? I'm like, no, because all the Marvel movies that have been shot on digital are color graded like this. Long and the short of it, this movie is really, really ugly to me. If you can look past that, I'm glad you can. I really am. On top of that, I don't know if it's just because I'm tired of the Marvel movies or something, but I cannot give this movie a higher ranking than I'm giving it. I can't do it. All in all, it is a fine movie. I'm not keen on it anymore. I went into this expecting to not like it, and I got into it, and I enjoyed it. I had fun watching it. Now, I'm not going to say that it is a fine piece of cinema, because it's not. I know J.J. Abrams is a director that people love to hate, and they're right about all his flaws when it comes to this movie, because all of Abrams' flaws really come out to play in this movie. But it's still a fast-paced action film that I enjoyed watching, and yeah, no, I just had fun with it. Whether it is an acceptable ending to the sequel trilogy of Star Wars, that's a whole other discussion. I will have a review, like a long review for The Rise of Skywalker up sometime this year, once I've got the footage to do that. My thoughts as they exist right now is basically, it's a fine movie. It's very much the Return of the Jedi of this trilogy, and the fact that it's follows two movies that I really do like, with like a finale that's just kind of, oh, okay, then I guess. Kylo Ren's character really does actually get a pretty fucking good ending in this movie, I thought. Except for the kiss. The fuck was that? Most of the characters are fun to watch. One of my co-workers once suggested that none of them could act their way out of a paper bag. I think that's a bit harsh. I'm not going to give them any Academy Awards any reason, but I really do like all the actors in this movie. The only thing I'm actively annoyed about that is the fact that they did roast Tika really dirty in this movie. You can't just set up a character in the second movie of a trilogy and then sideline the fuck out of her in the third. That's just, you can't do that.
That's not how the Force works.
And of course there are my like other little things where like something would happen, I'd be like, well, that shit's dumb, but like I am under the impression that all Star Wars is kinda dumb, so whenever something happens that I think is kinda dumb, I don't give a shit. It's just, it's Star Wars, it's fun, it's silly, I don't care, I'm enjoying it. But yeah, I was emotionally invested in the movie, I had fun with it. I'm not gonna call it a high piece of cinema, but I did like it. This movie's slipped a little bit on this list because I do have a couple of problems with it, but most of all, I thought it was a pretty decent sequel to the first It film. I really like the cast in this movie. Whoever did the casting for the adults of the Losers Club needs like a fucking raise and a couple of cookies or something, because they did a really good job. And whilst they don't have quite the same chemistry as the kids of the Losers Club, it's still there, and it's still really enjoyable to watch. Bill Hader turns in the best performance in this movie by quite a mile, and I did not expect that. And yeah, it was a really enjoyable movie, but my problems with it lie with A, the fact that McAvoy is somehow the weakest actor in this movie. That's two movies this year where one of my favorite actors working today kind of sucks, and that makes me sad. And the other thing is the entire second act is justifiably bashed for being like the same shit just done 6 times over. That does get pretty boring pretty quickly. But aside from that, I don't mind the ending, as daft as it is. I mean, yes, I know, they bully him to death, but like, you know, it is not exactly a franchise that I'm particularly invested in, so I didn't really mind. But this movie did a lot of other things that I really liked, a few like little jokes that I really enjoyed. The Stephen King cameo was really funny to me. I mean, it's so grossly, ridiculously meta, but I enjoyed it anyway. It was fun. All in all, It Chapter 2 is a perfectly decent movie. If you like that sort of thing, I definitely say we'll go watch it. Spider-Man Far From Home is the only Marvel movie that came out this year that I'm in any hurry to go back and watch. I was originally actually going to skip this one, but then I decided to take my little sister to go see it because she really loves the Marvel movies, and I sat and watched it with her, and I actually had a pretty good time. Now, again, this movie isn't exactly what I'm going to call high cinema, but it is a good diversion after the dour darkness of Endgame, and it's really fun to just see Spider-Man doing his thing. Tom Holland is, of course, really fun to watch as Peter Parker in this movie. I really do love him in this role. And the chemistry he has with Zendaya on screen is just so infectious, and they're just both so grossly adorable in this movie. But moving from that, it's also just a really fun story. Mysterio is a really fun villain. He's not a particularly good one, but he's a really fun one, and I guess that's what matters. Jake Gyllenhaal chews the scenery quite spectacularly most of the movie when he's supposed to be evil, and it's just really fun to watch. There is, of course, some dumb shit in this movie, but I don't really mind because, as I said, I'm here to have fun. And having fun was not something I expected would happen with this movie, because I thought it was just going to be another average to shit Marvel movie. But yeah, this is the only Marvel movie from this year I'm really having any intention of watching again. If you somehow miss this movie, I suggest you go watch it. This might be something of a hot take actually, because I know a lot of people don't like this movie, and I really think the true answer to that is a lot of people don't like this movie's ending. And I'm with everyone on this movie's ending, because it's kinda dumb in some ways, but we'll get to that in a minute. Glass is, for its first 2 acts, a really interesting character study into the characters that M. Night Shyamalan has made. It is deliberately low in the action, because he only had so much money to make this thing. So instead he goes in for this really interesting study of what these characters think, and what they believe, and things like that. And it's an interesting concept, and we all know throughout the movie that Mr. Glass is up to something, but we're not really sure what. Then we get to the ending, and David Dunn dies in a puddle. And I can find in-universe reasons to justify them doing David Dunn that dirty. David Dunn that dirty. David Dunn that dirty. But all in all, it's still just a really disappointing end to a character that I really, really love from Unbreakable. When I went into this movie, I was well aware that Kevin or Mr. Glass or both would have to end the movie dead. But Dunn, no, I don't really think he needed to die for this movie to work, but he did, and just that is, it's an anger-inducing ending, and this introduction of a secret society that's been covering up superheroes really just kind of demystifies Dunn and Kevin in a way for me. It just makes them just another thing that's happened in this world that has to be covered up, as opposed to this really interesting phenomenon. And there are tiny vague hints of this kind of carryings on in things like Unbreakable, with Mr. Glass's discussion of comic books and shit, but it's not an ending that I particularly like, and it seems more grounded in Shyamalan's interest in pulling the rug out from under his audiences. However, the first 2 acts are still really solid and really good. Everyone's turning in really good performances, except for Bruce Willis, who's kind of phoning it in, but like McAvoy and Samuel L. Jackson pretty much make up for that themselves. Like McAvoy could carry the entire movie himself, I'm pretty sure, and no one would notice, because his performance is just that good. There's a sequence in the movie where he switches between personalities, and just the camera's just panning around the set the whole time. He's just switching from character to character just like that, and it's really impressive to watch. Anya Taylor-Joy is really good in this movie. She's got some really good chemistry with McAvoy. It's not a turn on the relationship between Kevin and Casey that I was particularly expecting, but I can't say I'm mad that it happened, because it makes sense. They're both broken people who never asked for any of this, so I like that they bonded on that a bit. But yeah, no, I really think that Glass has been done dirty because of its ending, and I can see why, but I really think that it is a lot better than its ending. And I think more people do need to watch it and appreciate it for more than its ridiculous ending. It's not the greatest ending to the Easter Rail 177 trilogy. It's definitely the least good in that trilogy. But all in all, given how great I consider Unbreakable and Split to be, that was a given. Dr. Sleep is a funny one for me because I wasn't really sure whether I was supposed to expect a good movie or just a passable one, but when I sat down into it, my expectations were set to moderate because I really do love The Shining. It is one of my favorite movies of all time, and wanting to sit down and see this sequel based on Stephen King's book sequel, that was something that excited me and I wanted to see it, but I also set my expectations reasonably low because I knew there was a very good possibility that it might suck. And this movie is also a movie that I think is hard done by because of its ending. Because the first 2 hours are a really fascinating, gripping, modern fantasy tale of a man with psychic abilities, that being Danny Torrance, trying to protect a child, also with psychic abilities, Abra, from these beings who eat the psychic abilities from people by slowly torturing them to death. It is a bit of a goofy concept, but it really does work in the movie because they make it work. And the first 2 hours are really gripping and interesting, and there's a lot of really good visuals going on throughout this movie. The problem is when it gets to the last half an hour and they go back to the Overlook Hotel and it becomes The Shining nostalgia. And that is pretty egregious for me, but even for the most part, that sequence still works for me. And it doesn't ruin the movie for me either because the last 2 hours had been so good. Ewan McGregor turns in a really good performance as Danny, and like from the moment I first saw him, I believed that he was Danny Torrance from The Shining. He sells all of the hurt that Danny suffered through the Overlook Hotel so well, and you believe that his character turns out the way he does because of his trauma and shit. The characters are the strongest part of this movie by a long way. Abra is a badass little girl. She is powerful, she's badass, and she's kind of funny as well in places. There's a bit towards the middle of the movie where the villain is trying to get into her head and Abra kicks her ass using an anime reference. It's funny, but it's also really cool and kind of frightening, actually. Rebecca Ferguson is just fantastic as Rose the Hat. She is by far my favorite movie villain in a movie this year. I have absolutely no reservations in saying that. She is my favorite movie villain of this year because she plays so weird and creepy, but also campy. Because, you know, this is a Stephen King thing. It's going to have to be a little bit campy. And I can see why people might find this movie a bit ridiculous. But I just want to compare the film's plot to the book's plot. Because you'll see why I think this movie actually did well, given what it was working with. Because the movie suggests that they want to eat Abra's Shining, or Steam as the vampires call them, because she's one of the most powerful shiners in all of America. The book, instead, has the vampires contract measles and then say, well, Abra will cure us because she's powerful, so we'll eat her. Which is kind of stupid, so I'm glad that they didn't go into that in this movie. Also, the finale of the book involves them going to the ruins of the Overlook and then Danny making up with the ghost of his dead father and then having the ghost of his dead father help him battle the vampires. Compared to that, I think what they did end the movie with actually works better, and in some ways I feel like them repurposing the ending of the novel of The Shining to cap off the ending of Dr. Sleep was probably the only way it got made, and it actually does poetically work. I'm not thrilled that Danny's dead at the end of the movie, but I guess in some ways it works. All in all, it's a pretty fantastic modern fantasy, and I really think more people need to see it, and more people need to appreciate it. I watched this one on the plane because I knew there was no other way I was going to be able to sit down and watch a 3.5-hour movie by Martin Scorsese. I'm going to be real with you guys, I'm not sure I like Martin Scorsese's movies. Now, I know they're good. I've seen Goodfellas and The Departed so far, and both of them are exceptional movies. There's just no doubt about that. It's just, I don't think they're movies for me. Perchance. I can't really say I'm huge on gangster/crime movies. But that being said, I can still see these are very, very good movies, and they deserve the praise they get. The Irishman is no exception, and the reason I rated it so high, despite the fact that I'm not particularly sure it's a movie for me, is because despite that, I still see all the really, really good things it's doing. And despite the fact I'm not a gangster fan, this movie had my attention the whole 3.5 hours, and there aren't many movies that can hold my attention a full 3.5 hours. It is a really interesting story about a man who swears that he was the man who made Jimmy Hoffa disappear. And it tells the story really well across the 3.5 hours. Like, it builds up to them meeting Hoffa, to him working with him, to him allegedly assassinating him. And everything builds up so well, and it is so well paced for a movie of its length that you don't really notice that it's so long. I mean, there were a couple of points where I was just waving my cursor to see how much longer I had, but like, I do that sometimes with movies that are 2.5 hours long, because unfortunately I can feel my attention span slip with every passing day. Everybody in this movie is pretty fantastic, and this movie has a pretty stacked cast. I gotta say, you got De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino, Harvey Keitel, Anna Paquin for like 5 minutes, Ray Romano. I mean, it took me a minute to take Ray Romano seriously because he is this lawyer who sounds like fucking Everybody Loves Raymond and Manny from Ice Age. I did get over it, but it did take me a second, I'm not gonna lie. Hearing the wolf's voice again was really great, but it is really just a fantastic movie, and it's also so very well shot. So far I haven't seen a Martin Scorsese film that isn't well shot. Dude knows how to film a movie. He knows how to pace them. If I had any nitpicks, it's that the movie loses momentum after Hoffa is shot, but this also does feel like a deliberate choice by the director to sort of just put you in the mundanity of De Niro's old age in the movie. I will give them some credit for the de-aging work they did on De Niro. Now, it's not perfect by any stretch of the word. He still looks pretty old when he's supposed to be young, but given the age that De Niro is sitting at these days, I think it would be pretty hard to do any better realistically. All in all though, I really do recommend this movie, and if you are scared by the length, don't be, because A, it uses that length really well, and B, given that it's on Netflix, I can guarantee you guys you spend longer than 3.5 hours a day binging Netflix series. If you really want to think of it as like a great big Netflix series that has just like episodes or something, you can do it that way too. It is a good movie. I really recommend it, and it really fucks me up that Scorsese wasn't actually able to secure a distribution deal outside of Netflix for it. That really pisses me off, because it's a good movie, and Scorsese, of all people, should not be done that hard. I was originally not going to watch this movie, actually, because I didn't really think it was something I'd want to go pay for. But the closer I got to the release day, I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to go watch it. And I had a grand old time. Daniel Craig's performance as the detective with a southern accent is fucking hilarious, because this movie, it takes itself seriously, but it also doesn't at all, which is really interesting to watch because they deal with like, it's a serious murder, but these characters are all caricatures, and deliberately so, and it's really fun to watch. Like, the detective is a caricature of an Agatha Christie character, except from America. If you can imagine Hercule Poirot, and I fucked up that pronunciation for sure, with an accent from the South, it's the funniest shit. Ana de Armas gives a really good performance as the main character of the movie. She's convinced that she's responsible for the death of the person whose murder they're investigating, and the movie follows her trying to deal with that and trying not to get caught. And by the end of the movie, it turns out that she's not actually the one responsible for it, but that's a whole twisty turn that I don't really think I want to spoil, because it's just so damn fun to watch. This movie proves that Rian Johnson is a fucking good director, and to anybody who's still gonna fight me on that, I say take off your Star Wars angry lenses for a minute and just watch the movie. There were a couple of tiny problems I could pick out, like there's this one character, it's basically, he's a Nazi troll on Reddit. That's the joke. It's just kind of a lame joke is my biggest problem with it. But all in all, this is a really fun whodunit. I really think everybody needs to watch this movie. It's just a grand old time. It's one of the most fun movies of this year. It's one of the most interesting on a cinematography level to me. Yeah, definitely when it comes out on digital or whatever. I think it's actually still playing in some theaters, but I really actually recommend that everyone go watch it. It's a fucking good movie. Go watch it. This is by no means a particularly clever movie, but god damn if I don't have fun with it every time. I've seen it a couple of times now because I wanted to show my brother this movie after he made me watch fucking Dora. And again, he had a grand old time with it. Ryan Reynolds as a Pikachu is a dumb enough concept to work, and it really does here. Non-stop laughs, honestly, with this movie, because it's just the intellectual disconnect between how adorable this Pikachu is and fucking Ryan Reynolds' voice coming out of it. It shouldn't work, but it does so well, and I really enjoy it. The actors in this movie, I mean, they're whatever. Bill Nye clearly doesn't give a fuck in this movie. He's just there to have fun. Justice Smith is, he's fine, but ultimately that doesn't matter. Like, there are some movies where to me a performance doesn't matter, and this is one of them, because I'm here to have fun and watch Pokemon. And this movie delivered on that. And I mean, on a technical level, I really should have ranked this movie a bit lower than I am, but I had so much fun watching it that I just can't do that. The world that it's set in also feels so real and so lived in, and all the Pokemon are actually really well integrated into the thing. Like, this could have been a computer effects disaster, but it isn't, because they're surprisingly well integrated, and the world feels somewhat real. And the director attributed the real feeling of this world to the fact that he shot on 35mm Panavision anamorphic. And I don't know, maybe on a subconscious level that's what's doing it for me, but like that wouldn't also account for how well the Pokemon CGI creatures are integrated into it. I think that's just evidence of a lot of work and care going into this movie, on a visual level anyway. The story is, it's kind of stupid. It's kind of a stupid story, but it's pretty simple to follow. You're not gonna get lost. Basically, I consider this movie one of the better kids films to come out this year, because it is a kids movie through and through, but I have so much fun with it anyway. It's a good movie. Again, I don't have much to say on it. It's just, I have fun with it. I can't hate it. It just puts a smile on my face. All the Pokemon are great. They're also really, really cute. I mean, look at the Bulbasaur. Looks like Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon. How can you hate that face? Anyway, yeah, just go watch it. Have fun with it. It's a lot of fun, and I know some people don't like it because it's kind of a stupid movie, but like, I don't care. It's fun. I love it. Shazam was something I knew I'd enjoy when it first came out, and I saw it on opening night with a friend of mine, and yeah, it was fun. I'll get like the negative thing about it out of the way, and that's the cinematography's pretty uninspiring, but honestly, everything else about it really works. Astra Angel and Zachary Levi both play Batson / Shazam to perfection. Some people do complain that there's a disconnect between the grumpy Billy Batson and the happy-go-lucky Shazam. I didn't actually see that as a problem, because like the way I saw it is, I mean, you give a 14-year-old superpowers, he's gonna go from grumpy to happy pretty fucking quickly. I can guarantee you that. Zachary Levi carries the comedic parts really well, and Astra Angel actually plays the family drama that surrounds Billy Batson's character really well. I was pretty impressed with his performance. Jack Dylan Grazer is far and away the best actor in this movie. He's just having a grand old time playing Freddy. I think this kid's probably one of the better child actors working today. He's always fun to watch in this movie. He's funny. And the story, again, it's a pretty simple one, and I can see why people would have problems with Dr. Savannah in this movie, because as a movie villain, he's not particularly good. But the thing is, he doesn't need to be, because the movie isn't so much about that. It's more about Billy Batson and his struggle with the concept of family. I've seen superhero movies try and then fall on their face to tackle themes like this before. It happens a lot, and it's kind of tragic when it does, but this movie actually carries it so well because the director knows what he's doing and he makes everything work. All of the characters in Billy Batson's foster family feel real, and that really grounds Billy in the situation he's in. He's looking for his mother, but he's been put in this home with people he actually kind of likes. And eventually he learns that these are the people he wants to live with instead of his mother who abandoned him. And surprisingly, the emotions in this movie pay off. I say surprisingly because I was not expecting there to be an emotional heart to this movie. I thought when I'd sit down and watch it, it would just be a fun movie, but it's got heart to it. And I'm really glad it does, because that actually does set it far and away apart from any other superhero movie that's come out this year. Now we get to the top 4 movies on my list, and these were the hardest for me to rank. These 2, 3, and 4 have swapped around so many times at this point. It just makes my head spin. So I'm just going to put it down as it is right now and just quickly move on from it before I can think about changing it. Okay, let's go. This movie fucked me up. I saw this movie multiple times because I need to go back and watch it, because it is really, really good. My siblings agree, for a change, because they never agree on anything, that this is their favorite movie this year, and I can see why. This movie is an interesting and unique take on the famous character from DC Comics, and it is a highly disturbing look at an emotionally and mentally disturbed man who slowly loses his grip on reality. Joaquin Phoenix's performance throughout this movie is just fantastic. I really hesitate at ranking him against Heath Ledger's Joker, but these performances, I believe, are equally good in different ways, because this movie slowly follows him as he completely falls apart from already being pretty unstable, because this movie suggests he's been in hospital before for assumably a nervous breakdown or something like that. But the movie starts with Arthur Fleck already having delusions of grandeur, and this plays out particularly disturbingly through his fantasies about his neighbor Sophie. It's such a disturbing movie in places. Like, this is one of the few movies this year that got a visceral gut reaction from me. There are sequences in this movie that just had me really cringing watching, not in a bad way, but just because of how creepy it was. There are sequences where it just holds on Arthur's face for 30 seconds as he uncontrollably laughs, and you can see pain in his eyes because he's trying not to laugh, but he's still laughing because of his neurological condition, and it's super painful to watch, but it's also just, you can't look away. And his deterioration into madness is similar in that respect. It's painful to watch occasionally, but you just can't look away because once the ball gets rolling, it just keeps on going to the point where you're not supposed to barrack for him. I ended up almost kind of doing so. And there are moments in this movie which really should not be funny, but they are. Like, every time I watch this movie, there's the bit where he stabs the guy in the eye, and then the little person's trying to get away, but he can't fucking open the door because the latch is closed. Every time I watched it, the theater was just fucking laughing their heads off, and I was joining them. It's just like, it shouldn't be funny, because it goes from like such a violent murder to a funny bit. But it is, and it's just a good movie, good picture. This was a movie that gave me faith that we can have original superhero-based content again. And this movie is barely related to the superhero comics until the end, when he actually puts on the Joker costume and goes on the show. And the sequence on Robert De Niro's television program is just fantastic, and it builds up and it builds up until Joker blows De Niro's head off. And that moment, there's just this feeling of, this is what the movie's been building up to. And then you get the sequence when he's standing on the car just with the blood smile on his face. It's such a visceral image. I love this movie. It is the best DC film of all time. If I have any problem with it, I think this ending goes on just a little bit longer than it should. I really would have preferred it if the movie ended with Arthur smoking a cigarette and saying, "You wouldn't get it," cut to black, directed by Todd Phillips. That would have been a far stronger ending, but no, they had to have that little bit right at the end with fucking "That's life." That's really the biggest complaint I have about this movie. Aside from that, it's just a fantastic film. I was blown away the first time I saw it, and I continue to be blown away on multiple rewatches. What a picture. Now, I know this is a movie that people love to shit on, and I can see why. There is some dumb shit in this movie. Like, there's a sequence on a research vessel where it turns out that some research primates escaped, killed the crew, and then attempt to kill Brad Pitt. It's a dumb sequence. And another dumb sequence in this movie is a moment where 3 characters just fucking die out of their own incompetence. It's got dumb stuff in it, but ultimately, for me at least, the positives far outweigh the negatives. This is not a movie about a trip to space. That's the major thing. It is a movie about a man who's picked up his neuroses from his father. A man who's trying to work through the fact that his father left him and then disappeared. And his inability to really deal with that meant that in his life, he's also pushing away the people he loves and focusing only on his work, just like his father did. And the story is about him coming to terms with that, learning from his father's mistakes, and learning to not be his father. The only way he can achieve that is by searching for him, whether metaphorically in his own mind or physically in his trip through space. The movie is more about that than it is about anything else. That's what makes it such an effective movie in my opinion, because stuff happens in it, like the sequence on the moon with the pirates or the primates. But all it does is serve to push Brad Pitt's character further into thinking about his own life and why he does things and things like that. It's a movie that isn't quite as clever as it thinks it is, but I am very much sold on it because of its emotional center, Brad Pitt's surprisingly understated performance, and fuck, this movie is gorgeous to look at. This movie is shot beautifully, and I'm slowly beginning to realize that movies get away with quite a lot in my mind if they're shot well. I'm also just a sucker for like sad boy sci-fi movies, and this is definitely a sad boy sci-fi movie. If you're a fan of sad boy science fiction movies like me, you will definitely like this movie, and I can see why it's not a popular movie. I really can, but I really think it's a lot better than anybody gives it credit for. And I think if you watch it, not as a science fiction movie, but as a movie about a man trying to work through his complicated relationship with his father that just happens to be set in space, I think you will enjoy it more. This is the most interesting movie I've seen this year by a long way. This was originally sitting at, I think, 3rd in my list, but then I came across some scenes from it on YouTube, and just the bits on YouTube reignited the sense of anxiety I remember from watching it in the theater, and just on that alone, I knew it deserved a higher spot on this list. This movie is wild. I remember walking out of it when I saw it and having absolutely no idea what to make of it. And that's not a negative thing, because this movie is deliberately as obscure as the sea, and I know that sounds pretentious, but I think that's probably the metaphor that director Robert Eggers would like being used on this movie. Its aesthetic, to me, is an immediate win, and anyone who's seen a trailer for it or knows what this movie is, knows what its aesthetic is. It's black and white, boxy aspect ratio, really grounds you in the era that it's set in, and it also gives a vague sense of claustrophobia, as these two characters really do feel trapped within the frame with each other. And part of what drives this movie is these two men trapped on an island together, slowly driving each other crazy. The performances from the two men in this movie are perfect. I'm not one to just to call a performance perfect, but they really are. Pattinson's descent into mania is played off so well that you can hardly notice that he's completely losing it until he's there. Defoe, he chews the scenery throughout the movie, but that works really well for the character he's playing, because the character is written to be a parody of like the old sea captain kind of shit. The dialogue in this movie is fantastic. It's grounded in the mannerisms from the time, and even just beyond that, it's just written so well and so cleverly. Despite this movie being highly disturbing and unsettling in places, it also has some really good comedy beats. Like, one of my favorite mixes of like unsettling and funny is a moment, I think about halfway into this movie, where Willem Dafoe gives a 2-minute soliloquy calling Triton to curse and destroy Pattinson's character, and it slowly moves into this frightening image of this man almost afraid of the thing that he's invoking. And then it cuts to Pattinson just sitting there staring at him. He's like,
"Alright, have it your way. I like to cook it."
But this movie, despite its comedy beats, continues in being oppressively unsettling right up until the final moments where Pattinson looks into that light and just fucking screams. Like, I shit you not, the most visceral reaction I've had to something in a movie was that shot of Pattinson as the light overexposes the film and he screams, and the scream is distorted. It's just, oh, it's frightening. It actually really freaked me out, and it continues to freak me out. It is one of the most potent images in a movie I have ever seen. I'm not sure why it sticks with me so much. It just does. Much as I praise this movie for being a technical, disturbing, unsettling marvel, it does lose out the #1 spot to another movie. And that movie is... If you had told me at the beginning of the year that my favorite film of 2019 would be a Quentin Tarantino movie, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have thought you were crazy. But it is. And I will hold this as my favorite movie of this year. I have so many feelings about it. I went and saw this with my brother opening weekend, I believe it was. And this was his first Tarantino movie. And I took him and I took a couple of friends and we sat and watched it. And the theater response was, to me, far more potent than even the theater response to Avengers Endgame. Because as much as the theater response to Endgame had me revved up, the theater response to this movie, it just felt right. I can't put it into words, but I had such a good time. It was so much fun. Like, this movie is fun to watch. It is 2 hours and 40 minutes long, and there isn't a moment where I'm bored, ever, despite the fact that there are really long scenes that honestly add up to nothing. The setting of this movie is so perfectly encapsulated. Like, every scene that they go through, I just feel this warmth coming off Tarantino's love for this era that this movie's sitting in. Like, sequences of from Brad Pitt fucking driving his car down the boulevard to 60s music, things like that, or the scenes in the Lancer set, Or Margot Robbie going to watch the fucking Wrecking Crew and just smiling as Sharon Tate watches herself in the movie, which is actually really funny because we have Margot Robbie playing Sharon Tate watching real Sharon Tate in the movie. I did find that kind of amusing, honestly. But he also represents the darkness in that era so well, because the movie moves from this warm feeling to this like 20-minute long, almost horror film sequence when Brad Pitt ends up on the Spartan Ranch. And this entire moment, this entire 20-minute scene is really tense because this is where the darkness lies in the era. And then it moves back to being quite warm for a while, and then we get to the batshit crazy finale where Brad Pitt fucking take out the people who were supposed to murder Sharon Tate with a fucking dog food tin, a phone, a mad dog, and a flamethrower. A flamethrower. This, on paper, this is fucking ridiculous. This is a movie that should not be this good, but it is, because Tarantino directs it so fucking well. Everyone's performances in this movie are brilliant. Like, the chemistry between DiCaprio and Pitt is just off the charts. Like, one of the best scenes in the movie is just them watching Rick Dalton's episode of FBI and just chatting like two mates, and it's one of the most believable friendships I've seen in a movie. I'm not fucking joking, it really is. And Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate, she doesn't say a lot in the movie, but she embodies what everyone says Sharon Tate was as a person. Deborah, Sharon Tate's sister, who's still alive, says she saw the film and said that watching Margot Robbie playing Sharon Tate was like seeing Sharon in real life again. Margot's that good, and the movie handles her that well. It's so many feelings. I'm going to do an in-depth review of this one too a bit later, because I'm by far running out of time on this one. This one's going over time way too much. But just, this is my favorite movie of the year. It's my second favorite Quentin Tarantino film. I love this movie so much. I've seen it so many times now. So yeah, that's every movie from 2019 that I saw. And I'm aware this was a really long video. I'm gonna have to cut the shit out of this one and make it even close to coherent. But yeah, no, those are the movies I saw this year and where they rank to me and what I think of them. I'll be back at you with some more content this year. I really hope to be a bit more consistent on this channel this year. I have a series on like the Star Wars movies I want to do. After that, you'll never hear me say the word Star Wars on this fucking channel again. I also want to talk, you know, Star Trek, Bond, bit of Doctor Who as well. I mostly want to talk James Bond because there's a new one coming out this year. And all that said and done, I think that's it for the day. I shall see you later.